Touring abroad was another big part where they get most of their money is touring. Sure, yeah, go for it.
Sorry, just quick question. You're saying that there's other ethnic members of the groups. Is that affecting the style of music at all, or is it still pretty strictly Korean? I know you're saying they didn't want a lot of overlap.
No, yeah, that's a good question. So, in terms of that, the thing I kind of glossed over, most of the idols are not making their own music. They're not writing their own music.
Okay.
They're helping. But most of it is brought in, actually I was going to get to that up here. Most of it is being brought in from like other composers within in-house, so like SM has a group of composers that write songs for them, or they're bringing in songs from other countries, like from European songwriters or American pop songwriters, and then translating, changing the lyrics into Korean and then marketing them that way. So in terms of the members themselves, the music doesn't change that much from that, but the influence from different composers, like if you kind of track who wrote the song, you can see certain veins of influence depending on who's doing it. And that's why within each idol house, like SM or JYP, you tend to get a certain sound from them, and it's because of the composers they choose to work with. So, cool.
So they bring in people from language-speaking countries like English to, like, for, I don't know, specific markets that they're at. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's kind of crazy how East Asia had to do this part, or else it would not have survived today.
Yeah, well, and I think for the big thing was it was the goal of trying to survive, right? Like trying to expand the market so you're not dependent on a Korean market. So if the Korean market were to fail suddenly, or like the economic system would just go down, you have other markets you're pulling money from. You have the Japanese market, the Chinese market, the American market that you can get money from, so your entire company won't tank. So the bigger these companies get, the more they have to market out in order to keep their revenue high enough to keep expanding and keep making more groups and keep doing stuff. So, but yeah. So as I was saying with the question, they bring they use the popularity. Oh, no, actually, I didn't put this on here. But so the other thing, I was talking about how dramas were kind of the first big marketing out of Korea. Dramas often will have like 4 or 5 songs total that play over and over, and so they would use like the idols who were singing those songs would often become very popular in the country where that drama became popular. So like Winter Sonata became popular, and the songs from Winter Sonata became popular, so the idols who sang them became popular in Japan. So a lot of the companies will kind of use dramas and kind of piggyback on their popularity in another market to sell their idols to that market. And also a lot of idols are also actors and actresses. So they would be in dramas, which would help their market share increase in countries if those dramas became popular outside of Korea. And then the thing I forgot to put on here, which I'm glad you asked the question, the other thing is they bring in composers and songwriters from other countries, and also choreographers, stylists, all those kinds of things. Like you're mentioning, Taeyang's choreographer was from...
Sean Evarista, he taught at Westlake School of Performing Arts and Music.
Yeah, and one of the most famous ones, the Berklee School of Music on the East Coast, not my Berklee, the other Berklee, which is, I get that all the time when I'm in Korea, is really popular. They tend to use that school a lot as kind of like a almost composer farm. Like artists, composers and songwriters will go there to that school, and then they will bring them right back to Korea to be K-pop composers and songwriters and things like that. So there are certain schools and certain places that they tend to really pull from in terms of talent. But yeah, they will pull talent from every part of the idol machine from all over the world to try to expand the market reach. So. And that's where we get Hallyu, which is Korean wave. So that's the word for the spread of Korean culture starting in the late 1990s and early 2000s. It first spread to Asia, Japan, and China. Taiwan is where it first kind of became popular. And China's kind of a difficult market. There's a history of back and forth with China kind of tamping down and trying to censor or stop Korean dramas from getting into China, and it never really works. People still watch it. And actually sometimes it makes it more popular if the Chinese government tries to get people to stop. But yeah, so the first spread, it was kind of a local spread out. And then in 2010, it started to really spread to Europe and the US, And the reason academics say that this happened, or like kind of the analysis of it in retrospect, is because of these new technological mediums. And the big one is YouTube. So it's kind of a comparative case. Japan, in the Japanese market, was really invested in physical mediums. So CDs, selling CDs, physical CDs. And they thought that if they do too much digital that could be free, they would not make any money. You know, because you don't, especially during early YouTube, you didn't make money off of YouTube. But the Korean market instead saw YouTube as a way to market without having to pay any money. You make videos that are really interesting and people like, they'll watch the videos over and over, and then they'll buy the stuff on iTunes or things like that, you know, or they'll go to shows when you go tour in their country. So it was kind of this, and early, especially early YouTube videos, not too much investment in the cost of making the video as well, but it still looks very high quality. So that was, and also in terms of using social media as well, these kinds of things really helped promote K-pop to, especially a Western audience with YouTube, which kind of helped them expand in the 2010. Yes?
And I noticed there's a lot of hypocrisy when, like, countries like China and Japan, they thought, oh yeah, physical media, it's not gonna go, and then it's like, oh shit, digital wave is coming, we gotta do it, and then they start slapping flags on anyone who like does live shows, even though it's free marketing, hey, we're doing free marketing.
Well, in Japan, still to this day, is very, like, especially the rock, you know, like the rock culture, the underground rock culture is still very medium, like physical medium oriented. Like most bands still sell CDs at their shows. These days in Korea, almost nobody sells physical CDs because it costs money to make a CD, and most of them are not famous. The rock musicians, at least. So they have these cards with their, you know, like the Bandcamp or whatever, you know, code on it. That's what they're selling. But Japan's still very physical, and CDs are expensive in Japan, like $20, $30 usually. So.
Especially Hong Kong.
Yeah, it's
oh god.
Yeah, the emphasis for Korea on digital media is really what pushed it to spread around the world much faster. So, going on in our timelines, we just did the late 90s, so the early 2000s was more focused on solo artists. So looking at, I think you guys read a thing about Boa and Rain. And these were the first ones that were kind of purposely groomed to be marketed outside Korea, especially Boa. So their article, I think you guys talked about the difference between the American version and Korean version of one of her songs. So I'll show you a little bit of that in terms of how she's dressed and how she moves. Keep an eye on that and see. Also had an American producer work with her and produced an American version, which I was playing a little bit earlier. In the way she's dressed, but also in the way she's moving, and the way that, so choreography is a little bit different too, and the way that she's framed, usually, you know, in very specific ways. And this is very, you know, indicative of kind of J-Lo of this time period, that same, like that, I swear that Jennifer Lopez wore something like that at that point. So kind of more of a copy in some ways, honestly, whereas this is much more fitting with not only her style in Korea up to that point, like she kind of had this tomboy style, but also, you know, the movements and the kind of hip hop or you know, R&B angle that she usually took. So a lot of the fans, especially fans of hers prior to this kind of push into the American market, were really frustrated by how she changed, they changed her image so much to try to appeal to an American audience, and it seemed like pandering. And this is something I think a lot of times the Korean artists have an issue with. Like, there's other reasons for sure, but one of them is that American audiences tend to be really obsessed with this like kind of authenticity or realness, and so the way that Korean artists change their personas and their concepts all throughout their careers to American audiences sometimes seems disingenuous, like they're kind of putting on a show rather than being a real artist, which is a very American thing.
You don't see a lot in J-pop and Chinese pop that often.
Yeah.
It's like they still do themselves and not trying to appease to these audiences.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I'm not going to get into that, but yeah, there's a whole the way that the concept thing works in Japan, especially, is very different. But anyway, so looking at the kind of pushing into the American market, this is an example, you know, of you guys remember the Colbert Report? You remember that? Okay. So there was I'm going to jump ahead. I couldn't get the actual version to play because Comedy Central is mean.
Discovery Channel.
A documentary that kind of goes over what happened between Colbert and Rain. So listen to that.
Stephen Colbert.
Thank you so much. Time asked its readers to select their own list of the 100 most influential people in the world, and I'm right at the top at number 2. What? Who's at number 1?
It can't be.
My old nemesis, 24-year-old Korean R&B pop sensation, Rain.
I was leading for months on the reader poll online, and out of nowhere, this Rain guy suddenly grabbed the top spot, and like, who the hell is Rain?
Not to be outdone, Colbert created his own music video. American viewers were treated to Colbert actually singing in Korean.
Rain is now trash-talking me in this interview.
Let's just say, please don't quit your day job.
Rain, I challenge you to come on my show for a dance-off.
Uh-oh.
In mock outrage, Colbert invited Rain to a dance-off to see who was really number one.
He came on the show and did his dance. Like, bang, knocked it out. We were all just dazzled. Like, it was incredible to be in the presence of someone who clearly was so talented and had dedicated themselves so completely to their art. It really was like, oh, I'm in the presence of a master.
But this
This is a bigger documentary about Rain. But what I find most interesting about this, if you get a chance, try to go find that singing in Korean song. It's painful. Like, it's Korean so bad. But what I find fascinating about it is these kinds of, when you look at the way that a Western audience represents K-pop, often it will show you what to an American, the American audience who's not as familiar with it, what sticks out, like what they see as the kind of differentiating or specific part, kind of context cues of a K-pop schema. So like the way that he's dressed, the dancing, like a lot of this stylistic stuff is very indicative of the era, but like very exaggerated, very comedic. So it's those kinds of things, and you can see that even today, the way people that represent K-pop in a Western media context will show you what is sticking out to a Western audience, which is kind of fascinating. Okay, so we're moving right along. The early 2000s is kind of the girl groups, boy groups era. So Super Junior, Big Bang, Wonder Girls, Girls' Generation. These are kind of the big groups of that time period. And they were the first group that really gained a benefit from YouTube. They're able to kind of market to the US audience. So kind of the back end of Boa and Rain's career was when YouTube really started taking off. But these groups were ones that kind of really gained their fan base from their YouTube videos. So we'll play a little bit of that so you can get a feel for what is this Girls' Generation G. Have a little bit. Start there. Oh, I forgot to tell you the Shinhwa, the gold thing. You got the cuts between dance, like large group dance scenes, close-up shots, and then some sort of storyline kind of thing, or some other part to the video. And that trope kind of that sticks in with most K-pop videos, even coming up to today. The main difference, like I said, is just that these became very popular outside of Korea and really kind of started to push, especially the Western market. Let's see here. So we get to the Psy moment. Has anyone here not seen Gangnam Style? Thank goodness. Okay, good. If you hadn't, I was just going to say go watch it at home, please. So this Gangnam Style, as a lot of you know, became huge in the U.S. and Europe among people who were not already K-pop fans. Like it was something that was very much, a cultural moment. And the biggest things to talk about with Psy is that he was not a typical K-pop singer. Like, he's not skinny, he's not real pretty. Anyway, he was within Korea, before Gangnam Style, he was not that popular in Korea. He was kind of he was on YG's label, which was kind of known more for as a hip-hop label. And he was kind of one of their lower tier artists. He put out a lot of stuff, but was not nearly as famous. And the reason this was so kind of upsetting to the Korean industry was that he didn't use typical marketing strategies. Like they couldn't argue that these strategies that they'd put into place through their idol system had created this boom because he didn't do any of them. Like it was not, the video wasn't in English. It wasn't, there wasn't, trying to cater to an English market specifically, but it somehow became famous. So it became a crisis almost amongst a lot of academics, but also industry insiders, trying to justify or argue why it became popular. So there are a lot of different theories, obviously. The biggest one is kind of a negative one, but the idea that since it was a humorous video, it was funny, it plays into this kind of Asian comedic stereotype, or like, the funny, kind of Mickey Rooney in Breakfast with Tiffany's kind of comedic Asian stereotype. And so that's why a lot of people argue that it became so famous in the US, it fit into that already existing cultural schema for Asian men, which, like I said, is the most negative version of why it became popular. But there are other examples, other things, showing that the comedic styling was more American than Korean, was one of the arguments they made. And also that the language didn't matter because the video was so humorous. Like that because it was clear what was funny without knowing what was actually being said. So let's see here. So afterwards, after Gangnam Style became popular, the Korean industry really moved to kind of capitalize on this moment. especially YG. So YG, worked to pair their artists with other Western pop artists. So like Psy later did a collaboration with Snoop Dogg. They've had other artists working with Western artists or with like popular Western people. I think Justin Bieber at some point was gonna be put on something. But also doing English language albums or English language things. CL, I think, from 21 is working on an English language album right now. So kind of trying to take this moment and trying to work towards it. And what I find fascinating about Psy, have any of you seen or heard any of the songs that Psy has come out with after Gangnam Style? Raise your hands if you've seen anything he's done. Okay, for those of you that have, if you have, it's the same thing. Like, the songs are different, but it's still got they're funny, they're all comedic, and they all have a very specific hook, and they all have some sort of dance that's like iconic, like something that's very easy to catch on what the dance is, like the horse dance. So it's very indicative of how Korean industry insiders operate. It's like, this thing worked, so we're just gonna keep doing it. Maybe it'll keep working, which doesn't usually actually work very well in an American market. But what is working? So recent example is really great. The BTS, you guys, raise your hand if you know BTS. Yeah, check them out. So they won this year the Billboard 2017 Top Social Artist, which was kind of a huge coup. And it was really comes from a push from the fan community in voting, which brought them national attention in the US. So it's a lot like that Rain example, right? Like where Rain kind of took over that Time magazine whole. The same kind of thing. The fans really pushed and voted a lot and did a lot to get them to this top slot. And so that ended up with them getting enough kind of popularity and traction that they ended up playing at the American Music Awards this year. But there's something I really feel like I need to point out that is part of the issue with the American market, especially right now, which is this. Sigh. So you can see there's kind of this, this is an issue in general with K-pop or any sort of Asian artists trying to market in the US. There is a lot of racism in the American market. It's hard for Korean, even American Korean musicians to become popular as pop stars in the US. It's very common for Korean Americans to kind of get a YouTube following here in the US and then end up moving to Korea and becoming part of the K-pop system, because they can actually become famous in Korea. It's it's possible. In the US, it's a lot harder, and it's stuff like this basically. And a lot of this has to do with, again, this kind of racism about Asian male stereotypes that since they were dressed more colorfully and they wear makeup, the guy calls them a lesbian pop group. And also this issue of like, why would a Korean band be on the American Music Awards? Which my argument to that is they have American fans, so yeah.
So what?
right? Like if they have American fans and Americans want to see them, that's American music. Anyway, that's just my view. So let's watch them on the American Music Awards a little bit. You can see, and especially watch you can see they catch the audience a lot. So what you can.
I'm a little bit nervous to announce this.
Yeah, so keep an eye on the audience as well, like the way that the audience
performance.
What the reactions are.
To call these guys international superstars honestly feels like an understatement.
Oh, this is gonna be good.
TV debut. Make some noise for BTS.
Lost their minds on this?
Okay, so I gotta stop. I'm gonna keep playing it. Yeah, so you can see like a lot of people. You see there's certain fans, and you can hear the chanting in the beginning. That's a very common thing on music programs where they'll have fans come in and they'll chant during the beginning when there's no singing. So I'll play that a little bit again. You can hear just a little bit of it. You can hear just a little bit. But yeah, so you can hear, there's people definitely who know who they are and know their music and they're up front. And then you see other people who don't kind of know, but they're still, they're still into it. They're still jamming on it. So, and I actually saw quite a few presenters and YouTube people who did vlogs and stuff when they were at the American Music Awards trying to find BTS. Like that was like, I'm gonna find BTS and shake their hand. That's my goal for today. After they saw them perform. So it definitely, it helps their marketing quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit about fan culture, because that's really what I think got BTS to where they are today. And honestly, if you would have asked me a year ago if I thought a K-pop group would be on an American Music Award program, I would have laughed really hard and said no. And then thought about it a second and said maybe if they sung in English. And I would have been very wrong, and I'm very happy to be very wrong. But a big reason as to why they ended up getting this, being able to do this is because of the fan culture around K-pop. So fans are very kind of devoted usually to a specific group. And the groups have names, like for BTS, they're the ARMY. So when they say they thank the ARMY, they're referring to like their fans. They're devoted fans who are doing this kind of work for them to help them spread. So one big thing is fan subs, so subtitling songs so that people can understand what the lyrics are in other languages. So this doesn't just happen in English. You've got Thai, Vietnamese, Chinese, Japanese. You've got a lot of different types of subs. And the thing that I find most interesting within this culture is these color-coded lyrics. So they will do songs where they will not only give you Korean pronunciation for the Korean and then the English translation, but they'll color code who's singing at what point. And the picture they use is from the music video. So it's basically teaching you who's who. Like you can learn people's voices and their, what they do, how often they're singing. So it kind of gets you kind of indoctrinated into the fandom of this group. So we'll watch a little bit of that and see how that operates. This is Vic's Voodoo Doll. Okay. So you can see how that watching these videos, you can start to really recognize people, recognize their vocal style, and you start to learn what their role is in the group. So a lot of times, different people have different roles. So you got a rapper, you got the visual, who's the pretty one, you got the main singer, you got the main dancer. So like these kinds of roles, and then the maknae, like the youngest person in the group, who's usually the cute one, So you've got these everybody's got their role, and as you watch these videos, you get a sense of who's who in that way. So another thing is fan dubs and dance covers, so people will sing covers or do dance covers for these, especially, the dance covers are the most common thing that you'll see. And you also have a lot of groups, I know here, in the Bay Area, you have a lot too of these dance groups who will do a lot of K-pop cover dances. And then the other big thing that fan culture does to help K-pop spread is the commenting, voting, participating. So watching YouTube videos, like I've seen comments on YouTube videos like, have you watched this video today? Like watching the music video every single day to try to get those views up, watching it with different accounts, commenting on the videos all the time, trying to keep the things popular. So a lot of these fans came to K-pop through these digital mediums, and so therefore they know how to manipulate them. So that's what they're doing through this is keeping these things popular, keeping the view counts up, and all that kind of stuff to try to get theirs. And that's why I think that most fans tend to stick with one specific group, is they're really trying to get their group to be popular. So culture is communication. And this is where BTS, I think, really, got this right, and that's how they got so popular. So artists who do well with their fan cultures use social media a lot. So posting videos, like behind the scenes of them hanging out, behind the shows and stuff like that. The BTS does reactions to every music video, where they'll all sit for the first time and watch the video together and do a reaction video of it. They do messages to fans. They, all of them have Twitter and things like that. And then, like I said earlier, fans will translate these things, and especially interviews, like interviews that they do in other countries. Fans will translate them and put them on YouTube. They'll add subtitles, or they'll create these compilations, which often they add commentary or jokes to, which you get this kind of fan culture around combining interview clips to make funny videos. And so it's this way for fans to participate with and they feel like they're interacting with the artists in some way by manipulating and commenting on their things. So this is, I hope swearing is okay a little bit. Okay, so this is one of the videos, a fan video. With the American Music Awards, they did BTS did a lot of interviews in America. And so this is pulling clips from those videos and kind of making jokes about it. So we'll watch a little bit of these.
Who is your Hollywood crush? Hollywood crush.
Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt?
How many actions?
I know this, but I don't know name.
You know her face, but you don't know her name.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sad.
Sorry.
We'll find out. No, we'll Google it.
Yeah. I know her face, but I don't know her name.
What movie? What movie?
I know movie, but I don't know movie name.
Now you mentioned you want a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Do you guys have time to date? You're so busy.
For this one to make
Yeah,
sense,
well said.
remember Army?
They want to know the
So our Army is the name of the fan group, just as a reminder. So.
fans want to know, will you guys ever do an album in English?
Will we produce the whole album in English? Yeah. That's a question? That's a question?
The album is coming up soon.
Right.
So why not English?
Bitch, let me tell you something.
They're gonna get on. They're considering it.
And you should definitely come Charlie, podcast the word with us.
What American artists really inspire your music?
Okay,
What do you guys see the group at BTS in 10 years?
There we go. Yeah, so you get a lot of these, there's a ton of these kinds of videos with people putting these things together and making jokes, and it creates the sense of community in that way. Let's see, okay, we've got just enough time, so we're gonna talk about rock music real quick. So, rock music in Korea, starting in the 90s, has a very similar kind of origin to K-pop, actually, because everyone points to one specific artist and one specific song as kind of the big start of rock music in Korea in the 90s, the specific punk scene. So we'll listen to a little bit of that, you can get a sense of the difference between. plays to this day, and they play underground shows still. They play big venues as well, but and they're the nicest guys in the world. Oh my gosh. Anyway, so rock music starts in Hongdae in the mid-1990s. So this is kind of near Hongik Arts University, but it's also close to Gyeongsae and Ewha, so it's kind of a college area of Seoul. And the big kind of point of origin for it was this kind of anti-Gangnam, anti-consumerism, punk-oriented ethos. So they claimed spaces through performing, art, selling. So a lot of these venues actually started as art galleries that students from Hongik Arts University would put their paintings in. And for gallery openings or trying to get people to come, rock musicians would come and play. And then you start getting more kind of punk influenced stuff, especially around, in 1994 there was a concert that was a kind of a Nirvana tribute concert. And that's where a lot of people point to as kind of the start of the punk movement, ironically, a Nirvana tribute concert. But basically, yeah, kind of the people coming together and realizing like, hey, we all like this stuff, let's do it. So that's kind of the origins of it, and it's been going, since then. But these days, there's a lot of issues with gentrification. Hongdae has kind of become a popular, especially tourist destination. The Mapo-gu area they're trying to get it designated as a tourist area, like a specific tourist zone, which means they're trying to put in more hotels and more casinos, and prices for rent are going up and up and up and up. So these days, I think since I started my research in 2014, at least 12 clubs have closed in the Hongdae area alone, or we had to move out of Hongdae because it was too expensive. And most of the music nowadays is a lot of dance clubs and nightclubs. That's where a lot of the money is being made. So a lot of the rock musicians are getting kind of pushed out of this area. So it's hard for them to keep an audience like they used to. And also there's a lot of debate about whether they should try to move everyone to another area that has lower rent, or if they should try to spread out across Seoul and try to have it more, because the origins of it, because it was in this neighborhood, all the clubs were in like a half-mile radius of each other. Which actually worked pretty well because you could club hop really easily. You could see one friend play at 7 o'clock, because the shows start ridiculously early. You can see one of your friends play at 7 o'clock and then walk less than 5 minutes and see your other friends play at 7:30, and then go over here and see your other friends play at 8. And you pay 10,000 won for each venue. So they're making a decent amount of money from people kind of jumping around to different shows. But nowadays, because those clubs are closing and they're moving out, you don't get that hopping around as much. So it's harder for people to make money. Which then makes it harder to keep the venue, which makes it hard, kind of this cycle of closing.
Which I find it really sad, because I mean J-pop and C-rock are still going around strong as ever. Yeah,
and the issue is rock music in Korea does not have a mainstream outlet. There are a few little shows. There's Hello Rookie and a couple other things. But almost all radio, television is focused on the idol pop, and so it's a lot harder and there's not as many record labels for rock music. There's not, it's really hard to get mainstream audiences through typical means. So, but what's interesting is that the relationship between K-pop and rock is not the kind of antagonistic relationship that you would expect typically between pop and rock music. Because rock musicians see Hallyu and K-pop moving out as a way to promote their own music. So a lot of indie festivals or music festivals, like South by Southwest K-pop Night Out, and also a lot of indie festivals in Europe have Korea stages that the government pays for, and then pays to send musicians to these countries. So rock musicians can apply to do this, and actually K-pop Night Out almost always has maybe one K-pop artist, and then everything else is rock. Everything else is underground. So it's a way, rock musicians don't, they're not fans of K-pop usually, but they don't have this kind of antagonistic relationship. It's not, it's fake and we're so much better. It's kind of well, they're becoming popular abroad and that works for us. So, so it's not nearly as kind of anti-K-pop as you would expect. And they use similar strategies for external promotion and making it abroad that K-pop artists do. A lot of the ones who really want to become popular in the US will sing in English and do a lot of their social media in English or try to promote in English. And making it abroad creates success at home. So an example of that would be the band Love X Stereo. There we go. So Love X Stereo. This group here, they sing in English, and almost all their social media is in English because they became really popular at South by Southwest, and toured all over the US when they came to the US. And ended up getting a huge following here, so now they do pretty much everything in English trying to market abroad. So, get a sense of the sound. And the other thing with this is the second day, they did a challenge where they did a music video for every song that they have, like one video a day. And that was part, when I talked to them and interviewed them, that was part of, they were talking about, like K-pop becomes popular because of their YouTube videos. So we thought if we had a ton of music videos out there that were good, decent, that it would help our reach expand. So the other, we have a little bit of taste of the other, so that's kind of the electro rock side of things. There's also a little bit more of a softer sound. This group is from Busan. Well, I gave you a taste, I guess. So you get, and they also sing in English, and they're also they're very popular in Europe. So you get this kind of similar marketing strategies with K-pop in Europe. Also, I always got to plug, if you want to see more rock music from Korea or underground stuff, go to doindie.co.kr/en, or doindie, just search doindie Korea. And they have all the shows listed there. They have a lot of bands. You can check stuff out, listed by genre and things like that. So if you want to explore that a bit, that's where to go. I think that's everything I've got, actually. So thank you guys for having me. Oh, yeah. Feel free to contact me if you have any questions or anything.
All right, I will see you guys on Thursday, and we'll pick up with the Korean American profiles then. Help me thank Kendra one more time.